Well, thanks for being here this morning. For us, this is really a bit of a kick-off to the year. We have Shane every year and have had him every year now for over a decade. And it's always great. He's always got something that is really actually helpful and challenging to say to men. And then, of course, we're going to have him right over the weekend. And Shane, we just really appreciate you being here with us. Who's enjoyed Shane's stuff in the past? Comes and has a bit of a chat to us about stuff. So, mate, come. Let's welcome him as he comes.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's so good to be here with my Toowoomba family. I'm so glad to be back. It flies by to me. It's the same week every year, and then I get here and I think, has it been a year? And it has. And it's just, this is one of the more refreshing places that I go, and you're a part of something quite special. My part of today is to open the Bible. All right, and I take that really seriously, and anytime you do that, you want Jesus to get bigger, the cross to work better, the resurrection to be central, scriptures to get bigger, not smaller, and we want to explore wisdom. Like if this is your first time ever in church, and you're like, I've heard some things about the Bible, I'm not really sure about what this is, and how. Let me just look. The Bible's complex and it's diverse, but at its most basic thing, it's a book of wisdom. It's a book that tells us stories about how to live, because understanding wisdom through story is much more dynamic and powerful and life-giving than just bullet-pointed things. And so I want to read a story from Scripture today, and when you do that, you have to ask two questions. One, what happened? And then two, more importantly, what's happening in my heart right now because of what happened, and how will I respond to that? And so here's what I know about men. Look, there's all kinds of different personalities here, and there's all kinds of different passions and gifts and all of this. But one of the things that unites us all is we all want to be perceived as winners by the people in our life. Like if you say to me, I don't care what anybody thinks about me, that's just frankly not true. Now, you shouldn't care what everybody thinks about you, but you surely care what your children think about you, and you surely care what your wife thinks about you, and you surely care about what the people that they're closest to you. And the thing that sets men apart is, and our biggest fear, is being perceived as smaller, or being perceived as not enough, or being perceived as less resource, the quality of life. I want to talk to you about that, because the quality of our life will largely be determined by the quality of the decisions we make. Like, obviously, step one is to give it a go. To wake up every day saying, you know what, I'm giving life a go today. I might make mistakes with zeros attached to it, but I won't go down not swinging, right? Like in the South in America, it's give it your best shot. Right? In Australia, it's give it a fair dinkum go, right? One of my best friends says, love the life you choose, right? That, right? Any South African brothers in the room? Any Afrikaners in here? They would say, ye moet your vinger trek, right? Which is pull your finger out and give it a go, right? So, however you want to say it, the first step is to flip and choose to give it a go. To not sit on your butt just waiting to go somewhere else. To go, you know what? I have been given 24-hour gift of God's breath today, and right, wrong, or indifferent, I am going to absolutely give it my best go with that 24-hour gift of God's breath. And you know what? The people who inspire us the most are not the ones who make it through without mistakes, without perfection. They're not the ones who do that. The ones who inspire us the most are the ones that wake up giving it a fair dinkum go every single day. And then along the way, they make little adjustments to adjust for that. And so that's step one. But step two is not just giving it a go. It's how we give it a go. It's how we make the decisions along the way. And this is where the Bible's wisdom actually is profound. It stood the test of time. It's over 3,000 years old, and yet we can still go back to the first story in the Bible and go, yeah, I can learn a lot from that. And in the first story in the Bible, we learn that the way not to make decisions is solely based on right and wrong. if it's right or wrong, it's not that we shouldn't consider that. But if we only consider what's right and what's wrong, we will lose our life. Absolutely, we will destroy ourselves, because there's a lot of things that technically aren't wrong, but they're not useful. They're not wise. They surely don't get you where you're trying to go. And the quality of the decision making in our life will largely be the determining factor of the quality of our life. And the quality of our life will largely be the determining factor of how other people perceive our life. And other people perceive our life as winning and losing based on joy and resources and generosity and compassion and where we bring justice. But that all comes back to making a choice to give it a go. And then in that giving it a go, we choose not to solely base our decisions on right and wrong, but something more profound than that. And I want to talk to you about a more profound filter for decisions than right or wrong. And what I want to do is I want to go to an early story. It's a story of wisdom. It's a story of that is profound if we see what's going on here. And it's a story that stood the test of time. It's a story that's one of the oldest stories in the Bible, but it's mentioned in one of the last books of the Bible, like the author's going, remember this guy? Don't do that. Do something different with your life than that. And it's a story of Jacob and Esau. So basically, you have a guy named Abraham who has a son named Isaac, who has a son named Jacob, and Esau. And like any home, if you've ever thought my family was dysfunctional, this story screams us too, okay? This story screams you're not the only one. This story screams you're not alone. And it's the story of how these two boys interacted around a bowl of stew. And it teaches us a lot. This is Genesis chapter 25, verse 27. It's going to come up on the screen behind me. I'm just trusting the slide guy to do that, all right? The boys grew up, and Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was a quiet man staying amongst the tents. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau. But Rebekah loved Jacob. So right off the bat, you have a dysfunctional family. You have a dad that loves one son more than the other, so the mom compensates by loving the other son more. This is hardly healthy family dynamics. Let's keep going. Once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country famished, and he said to Jacob, quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished. And then there's this parenthetical thing that was obviously added later. That is why he is also called Edom to this day. There's a play on words there. I'll explain that in a second. And Jacob replied, well, first sell me your birthright. Look, I'm about to die, Esau said, which I think we could agree is it's a bit of an exaggeration. He's still walking, he's still upright, right? I'm about to die. What good is the birthright to me? But Jacob said, swear to me first. So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and lentil stew, and he ate and he drank, and he got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright. Now, half this room are narrative learners, so if I just tell the story, you'll pick it up. And half the story are linear learners, which requires bullet-pointed sort of linear thought. So for the linear learners, I did this for you. Next slide. So you have a dysfunctional family, right? You also have Jacob. That's a play on words. Now, if your name's Jacob today, I want to affirm that's a very nice name. But in ancient Hebrew culture, you never name your kid Jacob because it means liar, okay? It'd be like calling your kid dipstick or something. You just wouldn't call your kid a dipstick. You just wouldn't do that. And you got Esau, who's the hunter. Now the central part of the story is this red stew, and it's a play on words, and it's like a caveman. Next slide. It's like a caveman sort of word. Esau says, I want some of the red stew. Now the English translators are trying to help us read it, but actually what he said was more it was more caveman-y. What he says is ha-adam, 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 ha-adam. Literally ha-the-adam, red, ha-adam, ha-adam. So he literally comes in and goes, red stuff, ha-adam, ha-adam. Ha-adam, ha-adam. Like, ooh, ha-adam, ha-adam. Like, really, like this guy's hardly refined at all. Ha-adam, ha-adam. You can hear that better if I say, how dumb, right? Ha-adam, ha-adam. Give me, now, the way, just quick thing for like if you're wondering how the Bible works and how language works, why is he saying it twice? Well, in ancient Hebrew, they didn't have adverbs. So if you wanted to say something like, okay, peace, you'd say shalom. If you wanted to say big peace, you just repeat yourself. You go shalom, shalom. And if you wanted to say real big peace, you'd go shalom, shalom, shalom. So for him to go, ha'adam, 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 that's like, I really, 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 really want the red stuff. I want the red stuff. And he sells his birthright for one bowl of this ha'adam, ha'adam. And it's such a dumb move that they change his name, next slide, to Edom. Edom means red man. This is what happened. Have you ever known someone that did something so dumb that what he did that was so dumb developed a nickname, and then the nickname stuck throughout his whole life? That's what went on here. Is this guy sells his birthright for one bowl of ha'adam, so they change his name from Esau to Edom, literally reminding him of his stupidity for the rest of his life. It's like, hey, Red, what's up, Red? Hey, are you that guy that sold everything he could be for one bowl of red? What's going on, Red? What's up, Edom? What's going on? What's up, Edom? Right? You could see this in junior high. Oh, Edom. This is this bullying sort of thing that's going on, and it obviously stuck. And then it says that he despised his birthright. Now, to despise is the word, next slide. To despise is the word to profane. To profane means to treat something that's sacred as if it's common. Let me explain it as simply as I can. To them, and I think to us, it should be this way. If everybody takes a deep breath, that's a gift. That God gave you a 24-hour gift of his breath today, and you have a choice. You can steward that breath, or you can squander that breath. You can, the theological phrase in their world was, you can hallow the name, or you can profane it. You could treat it with the respect and the dignity it deserves, with no expectation to be perfect, but always giving it a go. They tell me that depression is at an all-time high amongst 16-year-olds. And everybody over 40 goes, how? What do you have to be depressed about? You have more resources, more entertainment, more money, more information, and more things to keep you occupied than ever before in the history of the world. According to Forbes magazine, the generation turning 19 today has more money available to them by the age of 19 than the previous 4 generations before it combined had at the age of 19. And they're depressed? Are you kidding me? They're anxious? What's there to be anxious about? You woke up today in Australia, a nation with motor cars, paved road stores that prepackage food for you, clean water in your taps, machines that do washing, other machines that do drying, world-class healthcare right down the road, and it's largely free or at least very, very affordable. This is a top 5 greatest nation on the earth, and we're stressed about what? What could we possibly be stressed about? This generation is so privileged, they can think about taking a year off and walking around Europe to find themselves. If you're over 40, could you imagine telling your father that your plan was to take a year off to find yourself? Your eyes would open 2 weeks later from the smack of it. Imagine my dad had been like, oh, look, there you are. Go get a job, right? What's going on there? Oh, disclaimer, I have a master's degree in clinical psychology. I take mental health really seriously. And if you're struggling with mental health, please seek the services of a competent professional, not your cousin Earl on YouTube, okay? That said, part of the depression issue is a misuse of breath. You can't take 24-hour gift of God's breath and spend 5 hours a day looking at 9-second videos of cats doing handstands and wonder why you're depressed. It's profane. Is it wrong? No. Profanity is not about right or wrong. Profanity is about taking something that's sacred, the divine, inspired privilege to be alive today, and treating it as if it doesn't require any more energy than 10-second videos on TikTok. It's profane. They use the word despised, Despised doesn't mean he did something wrong. Nothing wrong with trading your birthright for a bowl. It's your birthright. Do what you want with it. But to treat it as if it's common, no way. The other thing you have going on in the story, next slide, is you have the idea of iniquity. It's a word that gets thrown around, doesn't mean much anymore. But in Hebrew, it's a very simple word. The word is avon. And in Hebrew, every word every letter is a picture, every word's a comic strip. And if you put the pictures on Avon, it's 3 pictures. It's an eyeball, a fish hook, and then fish multiplying. And so when they read that word, they said, whatever your eye hooks to multiplies. Whatever gets your attention is going to dominate your perspective. And the lack of perspective is the enemy of hope. What happens is when something gets our attention that doesn't magnify the privilege of having 24-hour gift of God's breath today, and I'm going to use it to the best of my ability, when that gets multiplied, it can ruin our life. And it's not a matter of right or wrong. There's nothing wrong with a bowl of stew, and there's nothing wrong with a birthright. That's the least profound question. The more profound question is light and heavy. What he did in this story is he took the heavier matter, his birthright, and he traded it for the much lighter matter, a bowl of stew. See, for us, this story lacks a little bit of weight because the words don't matter as much as how people picture words working, right? So if I say birthright, we have nothing like that in our world. The closest thing we have is inheritance. But birthright wasn't even inheritance. It was much bigger than that. Let me give you a couple ideas around what the word birthright was in their world. Number one, next slide. It was carrying the family name for survival. There was no courtroom. There was no courthouse where everything was recorded about who owns what and where. You had to kind of do that by word of mouth and self-defense. It was imagery for everything your family stood for. It was like that. It was saying birthright was your role to keep your family and what they owned together. Let's say it this way. 3, it entitled a person to twice the inheritance. The firstborn was willing, they were willing to pay the firstborn double if he took the responsibility to maintain all that. Let me just say it very simply. Number 4, essentially the word birthright was a summary statement of everything you could be. It was a summary statement of your destiny. The word birthright was a Hebrew way of saying, okay, if you get to the pinnacle of everything you're called to be with that 24-hour gift of God's breath, there's a word for that. We're going to call that birthright. So let me summarize this. If you're starting to get lost a little bit, come back right now, because here is a 1-sentence summary of what's going on. Next slide. Esau traded everything he could be. Next slide. Esau traded everything he could be for one momentary urge. That's what's going on in this story. It's like saying, hey, I'm aware of everything I could be, and I don't care. I care about this momentary urge more than I care about the full potential that my breath could bring. And he ruined his life by trading everything he could be for one momentary urge. The wisdom in this is unbelievable because this is still true today. One day, I hope we all get to 85. I do. I hope we all get to 90. I hope we all, I don't know about over. Wait, I hope we all get to a nice old age where we're not always in pain and the quality of our life is fragile, because there's a point where that gets ugly. But there's a point where we'll get to 85 and we'll look back at our life and it'll be one of two things. It will be an intentional pursuit of everything we could be using God's breath every day, or it'll be an unintentional pursuit which demeans our life down to one urge, to the next 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 urge, and it never, ever delivers. And my hope for you and me today is that we'll make regular choices to always honor everything we could be with that 24-hour gift of God's breath over the next urge. Because what we find in this story is the next urge never delivers. And here's the thing. None of us are absolved from this temptation. It's literally all over the Bible, and it's all over our life. It is that common to what we are doing. There's this guy named Moses. And Moses was given this opportunity. In their world, they would call it a huge birthright, to free slaves, to bring justice. But here's the encounter. It's a little disappointing. This is Exodus chapter 3. Next slide. So now go, I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring them out of Egypt? And Moses said to the Lord, next slide, oh Lord, I've never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you've spoken to your servant, I'm slow of speech. Can you imagine this conversation? Moses, I have this huge plan for your life. And Moses is like, yeah, I know, but I just don't feel skilled enough. Sometimes we trade everything we could be, next slide, for the bowl of I don't have the skill. That oftentimes what happens is that when we default to is it right or wrong, we can ruin our life. The much better filter for our decision making is, does this decision belong in the bowl or does this decision belong in the birthright category? And if we can discipline our life to always choose the birthright over the bowl, we will still make mistakes along the way, sometimes with zeros attached. But at the end of our life, we'll be able to say it was an intentional pursuit of what mattered more. And that is rewarding. We do not remember the perfect. I would say Saul made less mistakes than David, but we remember David more than Saul, not because he made less mistakes, but because he lived every day aware of this huge gift of God's breath on his life. There's this guy named Gideon. He had a similar invitation in Judges 6. Next slide. The Lord said to him, go in the strength that you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. I'm sending you. But Lord, how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I'm the least in my family. The Lord said, I'll be with you. Imagine that. Hey, I got this huge birthright for you, bro. And his excuse was, okay, if you follow his logic, my tribe is the least of Israel, and my clan is the least of the tribe, and my family's the least of the families, and I'm the least. In other words, I'm the worst person on earth you could choose to do this. Sometimes we trade our birthright for the insecurity of I don't have the skill. Next slide. Sometimes we trade our birthright for the bowl of I don't have the heritage. This happens again with a guy named Jeremiah. In Jeremiah chapter 1, it says, the word of the Lord came to me saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Oh, sovereign Lord, I do not know how to speak, for I'm only a child. And the Lord said, do not say I'm only a child. You must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command you to. Again, I have this huge plan for you, and you don't have the maturity. See, sometimes, next slide, we trade our birthright for the bowl of lack of skill or lack of heritage or lack of maturity. Unfortunately, sometimes it's just much more blunt than that. This is a guy named Jesus, and he is talking in Matthew 23. He's actually mourning over a loss of potential. Here's what he says. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you. How often I've longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. So sometimes we trade our birthright for the bowl of no skill or no heritage or no maturity. But sometimes, and this is the real tragic one, and Jesus points this out, do you know what I could have done with your life if you had simply been willing to surrender the gift of God's breath to me every day and live to the fullest potential? To give it your best shot, your best go, to love the life you choose, to yay mocho finger track, to just pull it out and let's go do something with our life. Sometimes we're just not willing. And then what ends up happening is, and you end up in a professional's office. And again, sometimes there's a real medical reason for mental health, and there's some clear explanations. But sometimes mild mental health problems like depression and anxiety, mild depression, oftentimes comes down to a wasted breath. Over and over and over and over and over and over again. You're like, I'm not doing anything wrong. You're right, but you're not doing anything at all, which is not helping our life at all. This story is our story. It's interesting. 3,000 years later, this story is mentioned again in Scripture. Do you know how much oomph a story has to have to last 3,000 years, right? Like, seriously, I don't want to, very few people are going to remember you after your grandchildren are dead, right? Like, it's just, you have to do something spectacularly awesome or spectacularly awful for anybody to really remember you past 3 generations, right? And that's why this is Ecclesiastes wisdom, that all the joy in living is waking up today, realizing it's a vapor and getting the most out of today, right now, doing what God called us to do with the 24-hour gift of his breath right now. Any worrying about, oh, will anybody remember this in 100 years? That ruins the joy of just loving what we're getting up to right now with what God has called us to do. This story, boy, it survived. So much so that, I don't know, 2,000-3,000 years later, there's a guy writing Hebrews, and he writes about it. Check this out, next slide. Hebrews chapter 12. See to it that no one is sexually immoral or is godless like Esau. Now that's a big word there. Godless. Think about, if you know anything about the Old Testament, how many people could the writer of Hebrews have called godless that did more wrong things than Esau? What's the worst thing Esau did? He sold his birthright for a bowl of stew. Really? Come on. Is that really worth calling him? I mean, you've got Ahab, you've got Jezebel, a name that lives in infamy, right? You've got some really, really nefarious characters in the Old Testament. Anyone could have said, hey, you know what? Hey, don't be godless like Ahab. Don't be godless like Jezebel. Don't be godless like this dude. Don't be godless like that guy. As a matter of fact, there was just some really, really nefarious things going on. But writer of Hebrews, he's like, upon further review of the entire Old Testament, the person you don't want to be like is Esau, which is unbelievable, but it's true in rabbinical culture. The rabbis, to this day, would say the one person in the Bible you do not want to be like is Esau, which is frankly confronting. We would think that the person who made the least mistakes is the most honorable, but not to them. To them, it's not about making the least amount of mistakes. It's about giving your life a best go. Hebrews chapter 12, get ready for your mind to be blown, is right after Hebrews chapter 11. I know, mind-blowing. And Hebrews chapter 11 lists all the heroes of the faith. So what the writer of Hebrews does is he says, be like these people, don't be like these people. Be like these people. But the people he lists made infinite more mistakes than Esau. By faith, Abraham gave his wife to Pharaoh's harem. It says he greatly profited from Egyptian affluence while his wife was suffering under the harem. Isaac did something similar. Moses was a premeditated murderer. I looked this way and that and seen no one. I killed the man and hid him in the sand. Problem was the next day the sand shifted. You got this leg sticking out of the sand. He got caught. Samson lost a bet and killed 30 people. That's hardly emulatable, right? Jephthah killed his own daughter because of a rash vow. Samson was sleeping with prostitutes on his wedding night because he got depressed because his best man stole his wife. David had 700 women and still tried to go get the one he wasn't supposed to have. Solomon had 1,000 women. Hardly emulatable. Solomon was unbelievable. He was dating the entire city of Chinchilla. God says, you want to write a book on wisdom? Imagine that conversation. Excuse me, sir. Are you the guy that successfully navigated the affections of 1,000 women? I am. You got to be the smartest guy on earth. Let's go write a book. At the end of the story, the point the writer of Hebrews makes is that it's not about how many mistakes you make. It's about waking up every day aware of the 24-hour gift of God's breath today and not treating it as if it's common. Not treating it as if it's no more use than watching TikTok. Not treating it as if it's no more use than your next urge, that next bowl of stew. It's that. It's, wait a minute, hang on. If you're going to go, it's what you would tell your kid. It's what you tell your 11-year-old who comes home and says, Dad, there's this guy picking on me at school, right? You'd be like, stand up for yourself, right? Seriously. He's like, Daddy's bigger. You'd say, then go down swinging, but don't go down doing nothing at all, right? It's that. It's I am going, along the way, I'm going to try so many things using God's gift of God's breath on my life that I will inevitably make more mistakes than someone not trying anything at all. The writer of Hebrews says, hey, be like these people who made mistakes instead of this person who treated everything in his life as if it was cheap as his next urge. That's godless. The word godless there, by the way, is the same word in Hebrew as profane. It doesn't mean he did wrong things. It means he did nothing. It was that. He says, and he remembers the story. The guy, years later, who for a single meal sold his inheritance rights as the oldest sons, which removes the mystery of, I wonder if there's part of the story we don't know about and Esau was really, really bad. No. He sold everything for one meal. Afterward, as you know, he wanted to inherit the blessing, but he was rejected. He could bring about no change of mind, though he sought the blessing with tears. In this story, if you're not familiar, this is not talking about God or forgiveness. This is talking about Esau went to his father and asked him to reverse the decision, and his father refused to do it. In other words, sometimes, even though we're forgiven for what we do, the ramifications of treating our birthright as cheap as a bowl of stew actually sticks around despite how much we wish we had another go. It's that. He says, see to it that no one is godless like Esau. So let's see where this takes us. Good sermons are meant to be agreed with, not disagreed with. They're not meant to be agreed with or disagreed with. They're meant to be wrestled with for application. So let's wrestle with a few questions about where this leaves us. That is my best effort explaining what happened. Now let's ask a more profound question. What's happening in us right now because of what happened? And may we have the courage to act upon it. Let's say it this way. Next slide. Do we live as though there's no higher purpose, which profanes our destiny? It's not an indictment, it's a question. If you were to audit your life right now, could you say, I am waking up every day acknowledging the gift of God's breath on my life, and I am making mistakes along the way, but it is an intent to live to my fullest potential? Or am I living in a way which treats everything I could be as something that's just common? Or let's say it this way, next slide. Here's the problem. This pattern simply leads us from living to urge to urge to urge. One of the ways you can know that we're profaning our destiny is my life defined from one urge to the next urge, 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 only realizing every single step along the way that the urge never, ever delivers. Because here's what's so important to the story. If you go back and read the story, he sells his birthright, and then once he gets it, it says he gave him lentil stew. Have you ever had lentil soup? I have. It's not great. It's these little beans, right? I love the way the rabbis say this. It's just brilliant. Next slide. What seems so great. Next one. What seems so great, the ha'adam, at the end of the day ends up being a cup of beans. That when we trade our birthright for a bowl and we get what we think we want, at the end of the day, it's just beans. Let's summarize the whole sermon this way. Next slide. Esau traded everything he could be for one bowl of beans. That'll be our story. The story of our life will be one of two stories. An intentional pursuit of the birthright. Next slide. Let's say it this way. Is the story of our life going to be the pursuit of the birthright or a summation of living from one urge to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next? It'll be one or the other. And here's the thing. Every time we trade our birthright for a bowl, once we get it, it's just beans. It's just beans. If you've ever struggled with drug addiction, you understand this. Or you know someone, or someone you love, you see them struggle with the pain of addiction. They'll die without the next hit. It's just one more hit. And then they get it, and it never delivers what the last hit did, and they think, I've just lost respect of my family. I've just lost the respect of my children. I've just lost my job over what I thought I would die without, but when I got it, it was just beans. It's just beans. It's just one more piece of frivolous spending. Everything in me wants financial peace, but I just think that next shirt will make me feel better about myself. And I don't have the money, so I put it on my credit card, and I traded financial peace for something I thought would deliver, and it's just beans. Because I'm in a room of men, we'll say it this way, cars. Cars sometimes are our beans. And look, if you enjoy cars and it brings you joy, please enjoy it. But we all know that we all know someone, we'll say it that way. I have a friend who paid too much for a car and it cost him financial peace long term. This is what car salesmen do. And if you're a car salesman, I love you and I want you to be a successful car salesman. But this is what you do. This is, people come on the car lot, right? And all you're doing is going, ha-adam, 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 ha-adam. You'll die if you don't drive the V8. Chicks dig the V8. And then what happens is we pay 8% interest on something losing 50% of its value every 3 years. And we wonder why we're financially stressed. And then we blame Satan. What? It's Satan, it's us, and they're clever. They put your first payment off 45 days, so by the time the new car smell wears off, you look at it, you're thinking, I'm paying how much for this? It's going down how fast in value? I thought I'd die without this, but at the end of it, when I actually tasted it, it's just beans. It's just one more piece of cake. I know I'm overweight. I know I don't like it. I know I'm having health problems because of it. I know my doctor told me I'm at risk of a heart attack. But it's cake. It's in there. It's like grandma used to make, you know? It's in the fridge. You open the fridge, and the cake's like ha-adam, 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 ha-adam. And you think, I'll die without the cake. And so you eat the cake. And by the time it's through your mouth, it's like, man, shouldn't have done that. That was just beans. It's just one more drink. It's just one more. And you know if you're the type of person that can have 1 or 2 beers and stop, or if you're the type of person that if you have 1, you're going to have 20, and you know the difference between the two. Let's just stop being dumb about that, right? And you know if I have 1, 20 are going in my gut, and I'm going to lose the respect of my family, my wife, my children, but it's ha-adam, 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 ha-adam. We give in to that urge. And it's just beans. She is not worth it. You can hear that for whatever it is. And if your heart is beating really fast right now, and you're thinking, oh God, please don't go prophetic here. I'm speaking to you. She's not. You have a good woman, a wife that stood by you and gave you 2 or 3 kids and supports you. And yeah, you've been together 18 years and it's peaceful and boring and she's exciting. She's not worth it. But she's calling out to you, ha-adam, 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 ha-adam. You're thinking, I think I'll die without that. But if you ever give in, I've never heard someone yet that lost everything that mattered to them for that urge, and they thought that was worth it. It's always beans. When we trade everything we could be. The issue's not right or wrong. Is it wrong? Is it right? What? That's unprofound. The issue is, does this decision get me to my birthright, or is it me chasing another urge that's going to fail to deliver? That's the wisdom in Scripture. And that will be your life, and it'll be my life. One last insight on this from Jesus. Here's what he says. Next slide. Then he said to them all, if anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. But he adds the word daily, which isn't necessary. See, for Jesus, this wasn't a one-time decision that you just make once and then you're good. He knew how humans struggle because he was one. He's like, you know what? If you're going to live the best life, it's not a decision you make one day. It's a decision you make every day. Here's what we do. We wake up every day acknowledging the gift of God's breath, intent to live our fullest life with that breath, and we make small adjustments along the way to make sure that we're pursuing the birthright and never the bowl. Because if we pursue the bowl, at the end of the day, it's going to be beans. I'd like to pray for you. If you're willing to pray a prayer like this or be a part of a prayer like this, I'd like you to open your heart to it. If not, please feel free to ignore me, okay? There's no vacancy in God's work in your life for me to intrude upon it. But if you just know, you know what? God's working in me right now to make a decision to change something. I'd like to pray for courage. So if you'd like it on this prayer, it would say something like this. Lord Jesus, would you give me the courage to pursue my birthright and destroy my bowls? If you're okay praying something like that, Lord Jesus, would you help me with the courage to destroy my bowl so I can pursue my birthright? I want to be a better decision maker. Would you look this way? Thanks so much for letting me be a part of your morning. May you be people who at the end of your life go, you know what? I did some right, I did some wrong, I did some things that were innocuous, but every day was a pursuit of everything I could be to the full gift of God's breath. May you be brave enough to pursue your birthright and destroy your bowl, because you know and I know anytime our life's about the bowl, at the end of the day, it's just going to be beans. Grace and peace, everybody.